Namaste and pranam everybody, and I am Dr. Alok Dwivedi, and welcome to all in my KSAS talk. ये हम लोगों का दूसरा सत्र इस मई महीने में KSAS टॉक का है। KSAS पूर्वोम स्कूल ऑफ एडवांस साइंसेस, जो कि यूएसए में स्थित इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ एडवांस साइंसेस स्कूल ऑफ इंडिक स्टडीज का भारत स्थित शोध केंद्र है। और इस KSAS टॉक के अंतर्गत हम देश दुनिया के अलग अलग डिसिप्लिन से संबंधित विद्वानों को आमंत्रित करते हैं, जहां उनके विचार अलग अलग मुद्दों पर हम देते हैं। आज हमारी जो गेस्ट हैं, वी आर वेरी हैप्पी टू हैव मिस स्वाति दवे. She is going to talk on Mrs. Swati Dave, sorry, and she is going to talk on mathematical practice in Tinnai school in Tamil Nadu, South Bharat. She is an educator and the project management consultant with over 30 years of experience in the field of civil engineering, education, e-learning, and training. She is the founder and CEO the Institute of Advancement of Vedic Mathematics in global charitable organization registered in UK. Her exploration of ancient Indian mathematics rekindled the educator within and the drove her to create the awareness of the amazing system of international platforms. She has conducted several Vedic mathematics workshops and training programs for the students and the teacher of all the great level in India, Europe, Philippines, South Africa, Lebanon, Egypt, and in USA. So, as we have already discussed, that she is going to talk us the mathematical practice in Tinnai school in Tamil Nadu. We welcome you, ma'am, for your speech. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Alokji, and namaste, everyone. Thank you for joining this talk on the structural and curricular practices for learning mathematics at Tinnai schools in Tamil Nadu. As Alokji said, the ancient Indian mathematics system has I have a passion for learning this, studying this, researching this, and in my exploration for understanding about the indigenous education system in India, I came across this wonderful structure of Tinnai schools that existed in pre-colonial and colonial era in Tamil Nadu. Before we start talking about the Tinnai schools, I wanted all of us to take a pause and thank Mr. Dharampal ji, who wrote this beautiful book called The Beautiful Tree on the indigenous Indian education in the 18th century. And in this book, he has shown us that there were widespread dynamic institutions of learning in the pre-colonial era. And one of the such was the Tinnai schools. One of this dynamic institution was Tinnai schools. And what struck me most about this book was the introduction, which is an excerpt from the speech given by Mahatma Gandhi at Chatham House, London, on October 20th, 1931. I'm just going to read a couple of initial lines of this paragraph just to set the tone about what we are going to talk today. He says that, I say without fear of my figures being challenged successfully that today, India is more illiterate than it was 50 or 100 years ago. And so is Burma, because the British administrators, when they came to India, instead of taking hold of things as they were, began to root them out. They scratched the soil and began to look at the root and left the root like that, and the beautiful tree perished. One of such root that perished to the colonial administration is again Tinnai schools. But I'm not going to talk about the bad part about what happened to the Tinnai schools, but what we're going to look at it is this beautiful and the robust education system and focus on what they taught, how they taught, and take some learning from that as to what education system existed in our Bharat during that time. So Tinnai means veranda in Tamil. However, the antiquity is not very well known, like when exactly these systems started, because there's no inscription available in Tamil that seem to mention the Tinnai schools. However, you can find some accounts of Tinnai schools in the 17th century travelogues by some European travelers. But again, we don't know how far before was Tinnai school existing. The existence came for the first time to be known in the survey report called Minutes on Education, which was a survey report on indigenous schools, which was ordered by the British East India Company under the governorship of Thomas Munro in 1822. And in that survey report was the first time they talked about that such an institutions existed and had a little more organized study of these institutions during that time. Unfortunately, we do not have a very organized material on Tinnai schools. Most of it is available in Tamil. And for me, that was very difficult to understand. So my research is based completely or mostly on the extensive research which is done by Senthil Babu, who is a researcher at the French Institute of Pondicherry. And the secondary research done by the other scholars on the Tamil, on this Tinnai schools is the basis of my study. So let's go back to that era. I don't know what era are we talking about, but let's go a little before 1900s. What was the structure of the education at that time? We did have pathshalas, which were typically elementary schools. There were tolls, which are akin to our colleges, and there were also madrasas, which were Arabic learning schools at that time. Tinnai schools were local elementary schools in, again, as I said, in Tamil Nadu in South India. And again, Tinnai means veranda, and that's the reason they got its name, because they were held in front of verandas of houses that usually belonged to prominent notables or school teachers. And they were usually run by a single teacher who is typically male. Every village or a group of villages had one Tinnai school where the children would be within walking distance of 7 to 8 miles, which is an ideal. If you look at what happens in the US, we also have these schools near so that the kids don't have to travel a lot, right? The primary goal of the Tinnai school was to get the children ready for adulthood. And the fundamental aim was to enable the children to become competent in the transaction of letters and numbers within the local society and its network in the region. Again, we have to understand that Tinnai schools were the elementary schools. So anybody who is interested would go and study more. But here, the primary goal was to get them ready for adulthood, means know their numbers, know their language, and then go into the society. What was the criteria for the admission? The local boys at the age of 5 from upper and middle caste groups were eligible for admission. The period of instruction would vary between 7 to 8 years. Again, this period of 7 to 8 years is variable. It varied from school to school, from villages to villages. And the fee structure, who paid that? Fees varied, the fees also varied from school to school and village to village, because it was a very localized structure. And the families of the children paid straight to the teacher in cash and in kind and on periodic basis. The teacher was paid on specific occasions of religious significance, like maybe like Guru Purnima, Dashera, Diwali, or during particular stages of progress made in the curriculum. Free labor on the agricultural land of the teacher is also noted as kind of payment. So this is how the Tinnai schools, the students paid. Yeah. Who were the teachers? Earlier, the Tinnai teachers were Panchangis, Brahmins who knew the almanac, the Pantadams, non-Brahmin preparers, Kanakins, who were the accountants and the bookkeeper, or the Puranic reciters, textual reciters of long epic poems. But by the first quarter of 19th century, the night teachers also included scribes and accountants who could not get clerical jobs in company offices, as well as converts educated by Protestant missionaries. What did the council look like? There was no formal governing body that was responsible for the day-to-day functioning of the schools. The community actively participated or gave input to what was taught depending on the societal needs at the local level. So there was a framework of curriculum, but the teachers and the society would customize it for the need of that particular society at the local level. What did the class structure look like? They were grouped according to the level of understanding of language and mathematics and not age, which makes sense. And classes did not have a maximum or minimum number of students. And they had this beautiful system of monitor. The teacher would appoint a bright senior student from the class as a monitor, who would receive direct instruction from the teacher and instruct batches of other children in the daily routine, occasionally supervised by the teacher itself, kind of an assistant to the teacher. And what did they teach? What was the major curriculum look like in these elementary schools? They taught Tamil alphabets in elementary language lessons, Tamil numerals and tables, elementary Tamil grammar, calendar dictionaries, ballads, moral lessons, forms of letter writing, and elementary bookkeeping related to agriculture and accounts. Seems to be a lot, but we also saw that this entire education of elementary or Tinnai schools was for 7 to 8 years. And what did the typical day look like? I found this beautiful extract or a typical day from the diary of this person who has written what did it look like. And he says that in those days, the village school was called Tinnai Palikudam. The system of learning was entirely different. All the boys have to arrive at school at 5 a.m. with their palm leaf chuvadis. All the chudis were connected to a wooden piece of same size attached by means of string and tied. And as soon as at 5 o'clock, what I like about this is if you look at their whole day, it's really interesting to see how the learning and the societal or mingling or learning of social skills all was happening at the school. As soon as the boys arrive at the school, they have to hang their chuvadi tukku in the walls and they have to recite the lessons taught on the previous day, loudly taking turns. At 6 a.m., they will finish their morning duties, bathe in the river, wear their religious symbol, and chant the necessary mantras. Then they will carry in their clothes sufficient quantity of clean sand. And now why clean sand? Because they would write on the sand. They'll remove the sand already spread on the floor and spread the new sand in its place for writing purposes. Some will write and some will read. They'll then eat rice. This is little interesting to see that he has mentioned that before eating, the teacher will give each boy a blow with his cane in his palm. This is probably to remind them that they're in school and not in their house. Then teacher will have the monitor. He's normally a well-built boy. They will come home for lunch and then go back to school again at 3, and the classes may extend up to 7 p.m. And evening, the teacher tell each boy the name of either a flower or a bird, animal or a village. He has to remember and tell the teacher correctly. And the whole focus was also on the memory of the memorization, or recollective memory as we call it. So the typical day, so the morning sessions would be memorizing and practicing the various tables. Afternoon, teacher would teach them what the meanings, word problems. And before the close, they would be given homework. And now the problem solving would happen outside of the school with the help of the elders. And then the next day they would come back again. So as my talk title talks about, I'm going to focus more on the curriculum of the mathematics that was taught in Tinnai schools. These are the 5 main buckets or the structures under which the learning happened for the students in math. I've asked my friend to pronounce it correctly because I really didn't want to mispronounce this word in Tamil. So it's poni lakkam. Pon means gold and ilakkam means place value. Within that series, within that series, they would learn the series of peri lakkam, which is ordinal numbers. Kirvai fractions and units of 1 over 320. Fractions consisting of 1 by 320, part of 1 by 320. Now we'll look at each of the series and understand. Okay, before that, we will see how did they learn all these things. So first, monitor pronounce the number which student would recite. Monitor then introduce the graphic symbol of that number in the Tamil notation. Now the student had to recognize the symbol, associate the symbol with the number name, recite the number name, and write it on sand, all in unison. The monitor would also hold the hand of the beginners, and each number would be made familiar. Primers were not textbook, but functioned like a manual. And each student would create their own manual. After they had learned everything at the end of 3 years, 4 years, they would create their own manual. So the focus or the understanding of the pedagogy was more on the listenings, oral recitation, memorization, recollection, all of this. And this is one of the bark where they would write in the end. So the first layer, as we said, was they would learn, like all of us, 1 to 100, the ordinal numbers. And all the numbers are represented by 12 letters. So if you see 1 to 10, 100, and 1,000. They would memorize this. Again, I would not like to use the word memorize, but they would learn the system in the similar way as we talked about, where they would first pronounce the name, know the symbol, write it down, and get it in their head, right? So first they learned their ordinal numbers. Then now they go into the fractions, right? So beginning with the 1/320th part, which was called as Munithiri, which is one of the Tamil fraction, and which is even used today. And then they would successively adding steps of 1/3 by 20 at each step. If you look at, these are the basic or the important fractions in the series. And the most important ones are the Monithiri, Kani, and Ma. Because Monithiri and Kani are also the units of land measures, and Ma are the unit of land and gold measures. And after the series, they would go to adding 1 plus 1/4, 1 plus half, 1 plus 3/4, 1 plus 1. And after 2, they would go back to their Perilaktam series of ordinal numbers. And how did they memorize it? They also had different tools to memorize. They would also, it wasn't that like you just know your Arai, Kani, but they would also know the relation between one to another. Like 4 Makani is equal to 1 Kal. They would also know all those things. And there was also meaning in the naming the terms. So Arai means half. So half Kal is half times 1/4 is 1/8. Arai Kani is 1/2 into 1/180, which is 1/160. And as I said, the other two subseries were Kani series, where now in the Munitiri, we added 1/320 at each step. Here they would add 1/180, and in the Ma series, 1/120. Again, go back to how they learned it. They learned it all through listening skills, all through understanding what they meant, right? So this series comes second in their understanding or knowing of their mathematical base or the foundation. I just tried to see if there was any pattern, and I did see that there was some halving pattern. I don't know whether they used it, but I just wanted to see if there was some pattern that I could find in that series. So the third series now we have is Citrin, and it's in the Ponilakkam series. And here we also start again with Munithiri, which is 1/320. But here, instead of adding, they're now multiplying 1/320 at each stage. And then they would have this mnemonic tables, or they would have such tables where they would again understand how that the fractions are a part of whole. Like in one Mukhal, 3/4 is 3 parts in 4. In one Kal is 1 part in 4, to understand what does the fraction mean, that it is a fraction 1 part of the whole. So they also had all these verses which they would use as a tool to know these fractions or know the connections, to understand what it means. It wasn't rote recitation or not knowing what they are talking about.
Nellilakam.
Now they come to the next series, which is Nellilakam. This is a primer that dealt with volumetric or cubic measures. We have to understand that the whole system was built on knowing the things that was necessary at that time for the society. So they know their numbers. Now they're talking about knowing the volumetric or cubic measures. Save to, and it started with that, and it is added till you obtain Kalam.
Yen Chuvadi multiplication.
So now, after knowing your Ponilakkam and Nelilakkam, which were the primary series numbers, now they would learn their multiplication tables. The multiplication tables were 5 types that they learned, wherein they would multiply the numbers in the series from Ponilakkam and Nelilakkam to each other, and the new series would be formed. So the first one was the multiplication table of whole numbers from 1 to 10. And if you see at the bottom on the left, you will see that in the bottom, there is a small verse which says, 5 jasmine buds bloomed into 90, shared by 5 persons. It's a mnemonic, and it's a total which is 595, which is the sum total of everything. Again, one more tool to understand what the numbers, or to remember the tables. Once they know their tables from 1 to 10, they would then go to another table where now they are multiplying the whole numbers with the fractions in the middle series of Ponilakkam, which was Kirvailakkam. Now, what are they doing? They're multiplying each whole number with each of the fractions, right? So I'm just showing that one. If I had to create a series or a table for Muntiri, I would multiply each of the whole numbers with Muntiri. The second would be for Arai, Kani. And these are all of them that they would memorize and would be able to recite and write. So table for Muntiri looked like this, where they're multiplying 1, 10, 100 with each fraction with Muntiri 1 over 320. And then they would make similar tables for Arai Kani Kani, Araima, etc. The third one, now they're multiplying fractions with fractions. So each fraction from the Kirwai Lakam is now multiplied by another with the fractions in that the same series. So for example, if I had to create a series of Mukkal, I would multiply with each of these and create all of the series. Yeah. So this is how it looked like. And the similar would be again created for the other ones. It's just mind-boggling as to how they learned and how much they learned. And now the third one, the fourth one is now we're going to the Nelilakam, which was the grain measures. So the first one, you're multiplying the whole numbers with all the numbers in the Nelilakam series, right? If I had to create one, so it's Chevatu, and then another ones. And then the last one was where you would multiply this with the fractions. So now they know their Poni Lakkams, they know their Neli Lakkams, they know all the multiplication tables, and all these was just through oral repetitions every day. The next thing that they learned was the tables for squares. Kuri was a square unit for the measure of land. And in that they learned again for
Perunguri, Sirukuri,
and Sirakuri, which are the large measures and small measures. They would know the squares of all these numbers. So how did they find? And this again, they're not writing it. They're saying the steps would be. So if I had to find the square of 11, which is 11 times 11, they would be expected to know the squares up to 1 to 10. They would say 10 times 10, 100. 10 times 1, 10, 110, 10 times 1, 10, 120, 1 times 1, 121, and similar would be used to find the squares up to 32. This is an example of how they would find for 17 times 17. Again, same. 10 times 10 is 100, 10 times 7 is 70, 170, 170 plus 70, 240, 240 plus 49, 289. Mental multiplication, understanding about what is happening here than just saying that 11 square is 121. Now, if I had to do the squares of 3 plus 3/4, which is smaller measures, Munrimukku, same process. 3 times 3, 9, 3 times 3, 4, 3 times 3/4, and you would get your answer.
Varudapirappu or Varshapirappu, the birth of a year.
Besides, now, once they have done all these things, they would also commit to the memory list of 4 yukam, 60 years, 12 months, 15 tithi, 7 days, all of these. Now, we would be thinking in today's era is, oh my God, one more thing to memorize. How much are they memorizing? Is it helpful or not? But what Senthil Babu has put forth a rationale in one of the paper is like, maybe this wasn't just memorizing like 12 months, like what maybe Chaitra, Vaishak, Jeshta, Ashad, or maybe the teachers would also connect stories and talk more about these to the students to give them worldly knowledge or the knowledge of our Puranas and antiquities. So if you really look at this whole system, I know there is a lot more than that, but if you really look, they would know the series, or they would all memorize something like 2, 7, 8, 9 plus of series or tables in their head.
Kanakadigaram.
So besides knowing all these things, they would also, there was one more thing, which was additional learning happened through this book called Kanikatagaram, in which what they did was they had verses or they had methods to find the techniques involving various kind of measurements. And for land, gold, grain, solid stones, volumetric measures, and a general section. And the verses or the techniques were to find like common problems like how much tax to pay, finding the purity of gold, measuring the land. And those were the techniques that this book gave to find, where now you're applying your understanding of the series of numbers to do the problems.
கணித நூல்.
There is one more treatise in mathematics that they use, which is called as Kanida Nool. Kanida Nool is also that in a verse form, they were given, I wouldn't say shortcuts, but efficient algorithms to calculate some of the complicated problem. Today, if I have to do 1 square plus 2 square plus 3 square plus 4 square, I may be able to do this, but they did have a simple verse in Tamil which said that multiplying 10 square, which is 100 by 10 to get 1,000, subtracting 10 from 1,000, we get 990, 330, adding, and 385, which is the answer. The tools to understand, tools to know. They had many such verses, and these are just the examples that I'm talking about here. So what did we see here is most of the learning in Tinnai schools happened through this pedagogy of learning by listening, memorization, recollective memory, oral repetition, differentiated instructions. I'm using this modern term of differentiated instruction because the research shows that there was customized curriculum for the students with different abilities, or the students that are coming from different parts of the society. Like if you're from the agricultural family, you would be given more learning in that part. And if you are from the family of the jewelers or the accountants, the curriculum could be customized so that you're more efficient into your own trade. Localized curriculum, again, what is required for that society was given more importance, mental mathematics always. And we have to understand here that it wasn't rote learning what happened later. It was recollective memory. The writing was only used as an aid to support your memory. There were no printed books at that time. So the teacher is saying the students are learning by listening. They're using different tools to memorize that. They are repeating it every day. And then at the end, they're writing all these things as their own manual. And everything writing their own manuals took something from 2 to 3 years to be really efficient in what they're writing. That was their final submission, or we could say that final thesis was that. Language was also a very significant factor in the learning of mathematical operations. So language and mathematics went hand in hand. So for example, if you're looking at Kanye Muntiri, the ye sound was the signal to recognize that you have to add. And in Kani Muntiri, the absence of the ye sound was the signal to recognize that if there's no ye, that means multiplication. So language learning and number learning were this integral to each other. So what I definitely looked into this, and as I said, my talk today is not, we're not going to talk, or I'm not going to talk about how the system, this beautiful system, went out of existence. It did happen, if to be very brief about it, it happened 1930s, 1950s, and there were many reasons for it. One, and the focus was, I mean, again, as we know, this was the colonization of the Britishers, where they were trying to bring in English learnings. So the native schools were closed because they did not get enough funding. The printed books came in. Um, so to kind of popularize the printing, this whole understanding oral pedagogy went out of existence, and slowly and steadily, this indigenous schools went out of existence, and we had the other schools which were more which taught English, and which kind of focused more on getting, which helped these people to get the jobs in as babus in the offices and everything. But as we see, and only the glimpse today, what I've done is given you the glimpse of the math education or the math framework, and it's just a scratching the surface. And what we see that it's an exemplar of a highly sophisticated framework that characterized powerful learning environments in clear and actionable ways with a focus on the needs of the community. And I plan to continue my research or dig deeper into the study of the indigenous practices in other parts of the country. Currently, I'm looking into the state of Assam, where they have another beautiful book called Kaithali Anka. There is also a book written, Shubhankari, which talked about the verses and learning mathematics, which is also one of the tools for mental mathematics. The idea is to see, the idea of studying this is not only to understand the history of India, but also to look at some of the pedagogical practices that can help the students today, where math phobia is becoming more common in, I would say, in all the countries, because I'm not going to say that it's very specific to any country. As I travel across the world, I see it exists in South Africa, it exists in Lebanon, in Egypt, in the US, and to kind of rekindle the interest in math, rekindle the love for math, it's very necessary for the educators to look at some of this indigenous practice and see if we can incorporate that into our teaching of the students and bring back the love of math for the students. Thank you so much. I'm open for questions now. And thank you. These are the references from which I have done my study. And I will stop sharing if anybody has any questions or any comments to make, or anyone has studied similar systems, want to talk about it. I'm very much open to all the discussions now.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am, for your wonderful speech. You started from the Tinnai school system, basically in Tamil Nadu, southern part of Bharat, and then the mathematical practices. भारत में देखा जाए तो जैसे इतनी डाइवर्सिटी है, जिस प्रकार से बेसिकली आपने तिन्नई स्कूल को लेकर मैथमेटिकल प्रैक्टिसेस की बात की, भारत में हमारे यहाँ जो ईस्टर्न पार्ट ऑफ इंडिया है या मिडिल पार्ट ऑफ इंडिया है, वहां पर भी आम जनजीवन में लोगों के इस प्रकार के गणितीय व्यवस्था का प्रयोग पहले होता रहा है। जैसे जो लोग यहाँ पे जिनकी उम्र ज्यादा होगी वो लोग, सर हैं प्रोफेसर सिंह, वो ये समझ पा रहे होंगे कि वहां पे अद्धा सवैया पौआ गणितीय गणना किस प्रकार से प्रारंभिक काल में बच्चे के दिमाग में रखी जाए, जिससे वो अपनी समस्याओं को देख सके, समझ सके। आपने अच्छा मेंशन किया कि जो कॉलोनियल एरा आया और उसमें जो हमारी मतलब ओरल जो हमारा ट्रेडिशन था वो धीरे धीरे वेनिश हुआ और इंग्लिश पर, पर्टिकुलर लैंग्वेज पर फोकस किया जाने लगा। और चूंकि वह उस प्रकार की व्यवस्था हमारे समाज में लाई गई, वह हमारे जीवन के लिए उपयोगी थी, उस बच्चे के आने वाले समय के लिए उपयोगी थी, तो इसलिए वो सारी व्यवस्थाएं आई। इनका रिलेवेंस किस प्रकार रखा जा सकता है, और आपने बड़े अच्छे से कहा कि ये संस्कृति से जुड़ी होती हैं, हमारी सभ्यता से, हमारी संस्कृति से, हमारे आचार विचार से जुड़े होते हैं, हमारी मूल्य व्यवस्था से जुड़े। तो ये सारी बातें आपने अच्छे से बताया। और भी धर्मों में ऐसी व्यवस्थाएं हैं, जैनिज्म में गणित की परंपरा आप ध्यान
Jainism,
देंगे।
yeah, there are tons of books. So when we also talk about ancient Indian mathematics, we think about it mostly, most of the books are in Sanskrit or something. So what I wanted to study was also to look at in other languages, right? Like we do
Yeah.
have a lot of them. In Jainism है, जैसे मैंने आपको बात की कैथली अंका की, it is in Kaithili dialect in Assam. So I have the book. I'm looking for help through the translation to see कैसे पढ़ाते थे. मेरे पास वो बंगाल की शुभंकरी बुक भी हैं जो स्टार्टिंग से अरिथमेटिक से लेके कैसे, एंड देन अगेन एज आई सेड, जैसे हम एंशिएंट इंडियन मैथमेटिक्स की बात करते हैं, हम मोस्टली सोचते हैं कि सारी बुक संस्कृत में लिखी गई हैं, लाइक ब्रह्मगुप्ता ने लिखी हैं, and all these people, the ancient Indian mathematics, Aryabhatta and everybody. But here my major focus was also in understanding about the mathematical practices in regional languages.
Yeah. So, there might be some questions from our audience, but going to the questions, I would like to invite Professor Balram Singh sir, the president of INADS, for the initial comment on your presentation. Professor Singh.
और लोगों का क्वेश्चन ले लीजिए, मैं अभी बोलता हूँ बाद में.
Okay, sir. So we will take questions. The first question is by Dr. Rajkumar. Please, sir.
Yeah. So nice presentation, Swati ji, and giving after your so much busy schedule and taking care of your mother-in-law. So you manage this. That's I'm very grateful for that. So my question is regarding that this Tinnai school. Do they have a co-curricular activities also?
That was not mentioned in any of the research. So when you're talking about the co-curricular activities, are you talking about the physical activities?
Physical,
Like
musical, drawing.
that wasn't mentioned in the elementary school or the Tinnai schools in my research, but it's a good point. Let me look into that.
Okay.
In all the research that I have seen or the papers that I have read, I haven't seen the learning or that the specific time dedicated to learning of other skills.
Okay. And the rotate learning when they do, normally I saw one rotate language learning in Kerala. There is a one school. They use some kind of movement to learn that. So these Chennai school also.
I think they mostly used what is mentioned mostly is the listening skills, oral skill, oral repetition, and mnemonics. Like they did have those small tools to remember.
Okay.
They did not or may not have had the actual, like as you say, abacus, like they make those hand movements to remember or something. Again, that is not mentioned in the study of Dr. Babu.
Okay. And
But I will definitely look into the co-curricular activities, which is a good point to look into.
Okay. And once someone is graduated from Chennai school or elementary school, what is the kind of pedagogy they have for the middle or high school?
So once they go, then they go and study their colleges, or they would go to the more organized colleges, or they would go to, I would suggest they would go to the ashrams for more organized. If you're a son of a Brahmin, you would go to study more of that ashrams to study more. So so as I said, the core goal was to get them ready for the adulthood, right? Like now it's like our 10th grade. I'm just saying, like now you have your basic understanding and then you go and study whatever you want to in the different colleges or into the different specialization, but you are ready to be an adult. You can function within your society because you have sufficient knowledge to also carry on the trade of your family.
So
right?
the Tinnai school graduation, whatever certificate or whatever that's it.
That they would, so their graduation was the submission of their thesis, which is that Barclays, they would write all their all the series, at least in math.
So that is acceptable for the other higher
That
school.
must have been acceptable for other schools. I
Okay.
don't think it would be so organized as to you have to submit your transcripts or you have to submit your things to get admissions, right? We are talking about, as we said, again, the antiquity is not known. We are talking about 17th century, 18th century, 19th century. Yeah. And it would be maybe it was very
They have to
informal.
submit the thesis.
Yeah.
It is interesting that elementary school student has to submit the thesis.
So the interesting part is they do not have books, but they create their own manuals, right? They don't have something in front of them to keep reading, and but it's not rote, it's recollection, right? And that last part they had to write without the help of the monitor or teachers. They should be able to write it all by themselves.
Okay. My last question is that the Ekal Vidyalaya of RSS, is that inspired from Tinnai school?
I don't think so.
Because they also do something like that.
They are into primary education, and I think the idea was again to start in an informal atmosphere, but I think they have gone beyond that with the modern computers and everything. I've heard that they have a lot of other things also.
Okay.
And they did start in the very rural part of India where there was no other infrastructure available. And there would be one teacher or one volunteer, may not be a teacher also, a volunteer who would just get the kids together and teach under the tree or something like that, right? And in these schools also, I have seen the schools, I don't remember where, like maybe Dr. Singh also must have seen, where each line of the students would be from different grades. Right? Like there's one school only, but then third graders would, like whatever third grade means or whatever their understanding was, they would start in, because there was one teacher. We didn't have the luxury of having many teachers, many classrooms.
Thank
But
you.
I think what we could learn from this is, again, informal learning, the societal inputs in the curriculum framework, the relevance of learning. You're not learning just for the sake of learning. There's not somebody who is sitting in the US and creating a curriculum for somebody in India, right? Like it's a relevance to what you're learning and what is useful for you.
Yeah.
So it was very localized curriculum. The society within this framework could decide what is more important for that society.
Society, yeah. And also, is it anywhere, because you also teaching Vedic mathematics also. So the Vedic mathematics is having some connection with the Tinnai mathematics?
No, Vedic mathematics is a different approach. So if you see, Tinnai school is a complete structure, right? How it is taught, what it is taught, it's the complete structure. Vedic mathematics is the different algorithms in which how you do the math problems, right? Here
So
also we saw that 11 times 11 is broken down into that, right?
Yeah.
So in Vedic mathematics, you would have a single sutra of to find 11 times 11. But I wouldn't say that there is a connection. But what I'm trying to see is how we can bring back this pedagogy, infuse it with Vedic mathematics, because Vedic mathematics also deals more with mental mathematics. But the difference when I was trying to see is Vedic mathematics is understanding. Like once you know the sutra, you can apply it. There isn't much of an importance given to knowing the series and series of numbers, right? Like that is not there in Vedic mathematics. So the fundamental difference was this is oral repetition, oral listening skills, whereas Vedic mathematics is a simpler and easier approach to do mathematics.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any other question?
one
Yes.
point I want to make. It's a wonderful lecture, madam. And I just few days ago only, I have attended one workshop on unearthing mathematical tools from Sanskrit astronomical texts. So in this, the teacher has told us about the ancient knowledge related to Aryabhat or Varamhi Brihad Samhita, and has given us various sutras and some typical words which can be used in the form of numbers. For example, kha. If we have kha, it is defined as shunya, or the like gagan, which is the meaning is sky, but it is again sky is having space, so space is 0. So this is how it denotes the number. Like if I write netra, so netra is again for 2, number 2. And this is how other goes on, other numbers goes on. So is there any similarity in the regional language of Tamil and these astronomical texts? Denote like how they denote the
So we saw
numbers.
that arai kani, arai was half, right? Like, so again, the language is, again, what we're talking about, language and numbers are connected, right? Like, so if you're talking, you do understand what the numbers mean. So there is definitely, again, this whole thing is and those whole monetary and all are like the everyday use for measures of land and gold, right? So they would definitely have connections to the numbers and the applications and the language. So in Vedic maths also, we have a sutra, which is Ekadikein Purvenj, which is, I'm just